Ethan was an ordinary man, living alone on the edge of a quiet town. He didn't have many friends, and most people in town barely noticed him. He worked in a small repair shop during the day and returned home late, tired but peaceful. His evenings always followed the same routine. After work, he picked up leftover bread from the old bakery near the corner and walked down the dark alley behind it. That alley was home to a few stray dogs, weak, dirty, but always waiting for him. Every night when they saw him coming, their tails wagged and their soft whines filled the air. Ethan smiled every time. He didn't know why, but feeding them made his heart feel full. It reminded him that kindness, even a small one, could make life worth living. But that night was different. The air was colder, and the streetlights flickered like dying candles. Ethan carried his bag of food as usual, but something felt wrong. The alley was empty. No dogs barking, no small paws running toward him, only silence. He looked around, confused. "Where are you guys?" he whispered, stepping further inside. His footsteps echoed softly. He placed the food on the ground and waited, but no one came. That's when he noticed something strange. The ground near the garbage bins glowed faintly. He bent down, frowning, and saw footprints, small but shining with a pale blue light. Not dog prints, not even human. Each step shimmered for a second before fading, like light trapped in the air. Ethan's heart beat faster. He looked around again, thinking maybe it was a trick of the light or some chemical spill. But the prints led deeper into the alley, behind the old fence. Curiosity took over his fear. He lifted the fence door, which creaked softly, and stepped inside. The small backyard behind the alley was dark and cold. The moonlight barely reached the ground. Ethan saw movement, something small, huddled near Tao. He dumpster. He thought maybe it was an injured dog. "Hey there, it's okay," he said gently. But as he moved closer, the shape lifted its head, and in that single second, Ethan's breath froze. It wasn't a dog, it was a little girl, or at least she looked like one. Her skin shimmered like silver dust, her hair thin and pale like threads of light. Her eyes, bright blue and glowing softly, stared at him with fear. Before Ethan could speak, another figure appeared, smaller, holding the first girl's arm tightly. Two of them, trembling, dirty, and covered in strange markings like burns or bruises. They were whispering to each other in a language he didn't understand. Ethan stepped back, unsure what to do. They looked too weak to run, too scared to move. "I'm not going to hurt you," Ethan said softly, raising his hands to show he meant no harm. The older one tilted her head, confused. Then she pointed at the bag in his hand. Ethan looked down and realized she was staring at the food. He slowly placed it on the ground and stepped away. The younger girl crawled forward, sniffed the bread like an animal, then quickly took a bite. The older one followed, but she tore the food into smaller pieces, feeding her sister first. Their hands shook as they ate. They were starving. That much was clear. Ethan's heart ached watching them. He didn't understand what they were or where they came from. But he knew hunger. He knew fear. He knew what it was like to be alone. He sat down slowly on the cold ground a few feet away. "It's okay, eat," he said softly. The older one looked at him for a long moment, then nodded slightly. As they ate, the glowing blueprints on the ground began to fade. Ethan noticed that their skin shimmered more brightly when they were eating. It was as if the food was giving them back their strength. When the younger one finished, she leaned against the other a bit and fell asleep. The older girl kept her eyes on Ethan, cautious but less afraid now. He gave her a small smile. "My name's Ethan," he whispered, pointing to himself. She blinked, then tried to repeat, "Then." Her voice was soft, musical, and trembling. Ethan nodded gently. "Yeah, that's right," he said, his voice kind and low. She pointed to her sister and said something he couldn't understand. Then she looked up at the sky, the night sky filled with stars, and whispered one word he recognized. "Home." Ethan followed her gaze. Somewhere far beyond those stars was the place they came from, and somehow he knew their journey to get here wasn't peaceful. He didn't know what to do next, but one thing was clear. These weren't just lost children, they were something else, something from beyond Earth. And as he sat there, the wind carried a faint hum above the clouds, something mechanical, distant but searching. Ethan looked up nervously, and in that cold, silent night, he realized he wasn't just feeding strays anymore, he had just met visitors from the stars. Ethan stood frozen in the cold alley, staring at the two strange girls in front of him. They looked so fragile, so lost, as if one strong wind could blow them away. Their silver skin shimmered softly under the flickering streetlight, and their glowing blue eyes blinked slowly. He couldn't believe what he was seeing. They looked human, almost. But something about them felt completely different. The air around them seemed to pulse, like a soft, invisible energy. Ethan's breath came out shaky, and for a moment, he thought maybe he was dreaming. The younger one, the smaller girl, clung tightly to the older one's arm. Her face was thin, her lips pale, her hair short and colorless. The older one looked more aware, protective, as if she had already seen too much pain. They both wore torn fabric, not clothes, but something strange and smooth, almost metallic. Ethan could see faint scars across the necks and wrists, tiny burns and marks that looked like they were made by metal restraints. His heart tightened. Who could hurt children like this, even if they weren't human? The older girl's stomach growled softly. She looked away in shame. Ethan understood immediately. They were starving, really starving. He picked up what was left of the food bag and slowly handed it toward them again. "It's okay," he whispered. "You can have it." The girls hesitated, glancing at each other, then slowly moved closer. They took the bread and ate carefully, like they were afraid it would disappear. Every bite seemed to fill them with light. Their trembling slowed, their color returned a little. It was almost magical, as if simple food was bringing them back to life. Ethan sat on the cold ground nearby, not wanting to scare them. He watched quietly as they finished every piece. The younger one smiled for the first time, a small, soft smile that vanished quickly. The older one looked at him, eyes full of fear, but also curiosity. She opened her mouth and spoke a few broken words. "Thank you," she said slowly, her voice like wind chimes. Ethan blinked in surprise. "You can speak English?" he asked. She tilted her head, trying to understand, then pointed at herself and said, "Lyra." Then she pointed at the smaller girl. "Ari." Ethan nodded gently, repeating, "Lyra, Ari." She smiled faintly, a fragile moment of trust forming between them, but the moment didn't last long. A strange sound echoed in the distance, a low hum like an engine. Lyra's head shot up immediately, her glowing eyes wide with panic. She grabbed Ari's hand and looked toward the sky. Ethan followed her gaze. At first he saw nothing, just clouds and the half moon, but then, for a second, something metallic flashed, a shadow moving fast above the rooftops. Lyra whispered something in her strange language. Pulling Ari closer, Ethan felt the fear in her voice even if he didn't understand the words. "It's okay," he said quickly. "You're safe here." But she shook her head hard. "No, they take," she said in broken English, her voice cracked with terror. Ethan realized whoever they were, the girls were running from them, and those glowing lights in the sky might be looking for them right now. Ethan stood and looked around. He couldn't leave them here, not in the open. He didn't know what he was getting into, but his heart made the choice before his mind did. "Come with me," he said softly, motioning toward the street. Lyra hesitated, her eyes darting between him and the sky. Finally, she nodded, helping Ari stand. The little one stumbled, weak and dizzy. Ethan moved closer and gently lifted her into his arms. She was light as air, cold as ice, and yet somehow he felt warmth spreading through his chest. Lyra walked beside him silently as they left the alley. The streets were empty, only the sound of the wind and Ethan's footsteps filled the night. He led them through the back road, avoiding lights and cameras. Every few seconds, Lyra looked up, watching the sky like she expected something to attack. When they reached his small apartment building, Ethan unlocked the door quickly and waved them inside. It wasn't much, just one room, a small kitchen, and an old couch. But it was safe. He closed the curtains and locked the door. The girls stood silently near the window, still shaking. He gave them warm water and wrapped a blanket around Ari. The little girl's eyes fluttered, and within minutes, she was asleep. Lyra sat on the couch, hugging her knees. Ethan sat across from her, trying to find words. "Lyra," he said gently, "where are you from?" She pointed upward again, whispering softly, "Far. Sky." Ethan's eyes widened. She wasn't joking, she wasn't pretending. They really were from somewhere beyond Earth. He leaned back, breath unsteady. His world, his quiet, lonely world, had just changed forever. Outside, in the dark sky, as something moved again, a faint blue light scanned across the rooftops. Slow and searching, Ethan closed his window tightly, and deep inside, he knew this was only the beginning. He had brought home 2 lost souls from the stars, and now others were coming for them. Ethan shut the door behind him, his heart still racing. The small apartment felt even smaller now, with the 2 strange girls sitting quietly inside. He took a deep breath, trying to make sense of everything. Just a few hours ago, he was feeding stray dogs like any normal night. And now, 2 glowing alien girls were in his living room, wrapped in his old blankets, shivering like lost birds. The room was dimly lit, the only light coming from a single lamp near the couch. Lyra sat close to her younger sister, Ari, who was half asleep, her silver skin faintly glowing in the dark. Ethan placed a cup of warm water near them. "You can drink," he said softly. Lyra looked at the cup, then at him, uncertain. After a moment, she took a small sip, then gave some to Ari. Ethan smiled weakly, trying to comfort them, but his mind was spinning. Who were they, and why were they being hunted? He walked to the window and peered outside carefully. The street was quiet, but far above, he saw faint lights moving in the sky, small dots, silent, almost invisible, but definitely not airplanes. His stomach tightened. Whoever was looking for the girls was still out there. Behind him, Lyra spoke, her voice trembling but curious. "Why, help?" she asked slowly, her words broken but clear. Ethan turned around, meeting her glowing blue eyes. He hesitated, then said, "Because you needed it." Lyra tilted her head, not understanding at first. He tried again, "Because it's right." She looked down, whispering something in her own language. Soft, sad words that Ethan couldn't understand. Ari shifted in her sleep, mumbling weakly at her, and Han knelt beside her and adjusted the blanket. Her skin was cold, colder than it should be. He touched her forehead gently, and for a second, he felt something strange. A faint pulse of energy, like a heartbeat mixed with static electricity. It made his fingers tingle. He pulled back, shocked but fascinated. Lyra noticed and whispered, "She weak." Ethan nodded. "I can see that." He thought for a moment, then stood up and went to the kitchen. He opened a can of soup, warmed it on the stove, and brought it back in a bowl. "It's not much," he said, "but it'll help." Lyra watched him closely, studying his every move like she was trying to learn human behavior. When he gave her the spoon, she hesitated, then tried to mimic how he held it. Her first attempt failed, and the spoon clattered to the floor. Ethan chuckled softly and handed it back. "Like this," he said, showing her. She tried again, smiling faintly when she got it right. It was a small moment, human and alien, sharing warmth and kindness. After they ate, Lyra looked around the apartment curiously. Her eyes stopped on a photo frame on the shelf. A picture of Ethan with his parents, smiling under the summer sun. She pointed at it. "Family?" Ethan nodded slowly. "Yeah, that was a long time ago." His voice grew quiet, the smile fading from his lips. "They're gone now," he said softly. Lyra's expression softened, and she whispered, "Sorry." Ethan nodded, appreciating her kindness even in her broken words. Hours passed and the world outside grew silent. Ethan gave the girls his bed and sat on the floor near the window. He couldn't sleep, not with everything happening. Every few minutes he peeked through the curtain. He saw flashes of light in the distance, silent beams sweeping across the rooftops, searching for something. Maybe for them. He clenched his jaw, whispering to himself, "You're safe here. I'll keep you safe." Suddenly, a soft hum filled the air. The lights in his apartment flickered, and his phone screen turned bright white for a second before dying. Lyra sat up. Instantly, her eyes glowing brighter in alarm. "They close," she said sharply. Ethan's pulse quickened. "Who's close?" She pointed upward. "Hunters." Before Ethan could respond, a faint metallic sound came from outside, like machinery moving through the street. He ran to the window, heart pounding. Through the fog, he saw a black van parked near the corner. No lights, no sound. Two figures in dark suits stepped out, scanning the area with devices that glowed faintly blue. Ethan's breath caught. They were searching. He turned to Lyra and whispered urgently, "We have to stay quiet." She nodded and held Ari close, wrapping the blanket tighter. The hum from outside grew louder for a few seconds, then faded away. After what felt like forever, the sound vanished. Ethan waited, barely breathing, until the silence returned. Finally, Lyra looked at him and whispered, "They not find tonight." Ethan exhaled in relief, his hands trembling slightly. He sat down again, staring at the door. His normal life was gone, replaced by something much bigger, much darker. Two alien girls, hunted by something powerful, now depended on him. He didn't know how long he could keep them safe, but one thing was certain. He wouldn't give them up, no matter what. Outside, the faint glow in the sky pulsed once more before fading behind the clouds. And in that small, quiet apartment, 3 lives were now bound together by fear, fate, and a flicker of hope. Morning arrived quietly, but the world outside Ethan's small apartment no longer felt the same. The air was colder, the streets strangely empty, and every sound seemed louder than before. Ethan stood near the window, his eyes heavy from a sleepless night. He had stayed awake watching for those strange black vans, but they had disappeared before sunrise. Now, soft light filtered through the curtains, touching the 2 alien girls still sleeping. On his bed, for a moment they looked peaceful, like any normal children. But Ethan knew better. They were not safe, not while someone was searching for them. He made breakfast quietly, toast, eggs, and milk, and placed the tray on the table. When the smell reached the room, Lyra slowly opened her glowing blue eyes. Her gaze moved around, confused, then settled on Ethan. "Morning," he said softly, giving her a tired smile. She blinked, repeating the word clumsily. "Morn-ing." Ethan nodded. "Yes, morning." Ari woke next, her hair messy and her little face pale but brighter than last night. She reached for the bread immediately, hungry again. Ethan let her eat, but his mind was elsewhere. Something deep inside him whispered that the peace wouldn't last. After breakfast, Lyra pointed toward the small TV near the corner. Ethan turned it on, thinking maybe it would distract her, but the news on the screen froze him in place. The reporter's voice was calm, but the images behind her were terrifying. "Authorities continue investigating last night's incident near Ridgewood Forest," she said. The screen showed soldiers, trucks, and strange glowing wreckage covered with black tarps. Witnesses claimed they saw falling lights and unknown shapes in the sky. Ethan's stomach twisted. That was where they must have crashed, and now the government was involved. Lyra watched silently, her eyes wide and trembling. She pointed at the soldiers on the screen, whispering, "Them. They take." Ethan looked at her sharply. "You mean they took your people?" She nodded slowly, her voice weak but clear. "They catch. They hurt. We run." Ari clutched her sister's arm, hiding her face. Ethan felt anger rise inside him. Whoever these hunters were, they had already caused enough pain. He turned off the TV quickly and said, "Don't worry, no one's going to take you again." But the truth was, he wasn't sure he could protect them. A few hours later, while Ethan tried to plan what to do next, a low humming sound filled the air again. This time, it was... And outside, it came from his phone, which suddenly turned on by itself. The screen flickered, showing strange static patterns and faint glowing symbols. Lyra's eyes widened and she whispered, "Tracker." Before Ethan could react, she grabbed his phone and slammed it to the floor, breaking it in half. "Hey!" Ethan shouted in surprise, but Lyra shook her head firmly. "They see. They find." Ethan froze, realizing she might be right. If the hunters could track signals, his phone had been a beacon. He quickly unplugged his laptop, turned off the Wi-Fi, and shut down everything that made noise. Lyra moved to the window and peeked outside carefully. Her voice dropped to a whisper. "They near." Ethan followed her gaze and his blood ran cold. Down the street, 2 dark vans were parked again. Quiet, unmarked, but definitely watching. Men in black suits stepped out, scanning the area with handheld devices that pulsed with faint blue light. Ethan's heart pounded. "They're here," he whispered. Lyra grabbed Ari and backed away from the window. Ethan ran to the back door, but it led to a narrow alley. No real escape. He looked around the apartment, thinking fast. Then he remembered the old basement below the building. Small, dusty, but hidden. "Come on," he said urgently, grabbing a flashlight. He led the girls through the narrow hall, opened the creaky door to the basement stairs, and helped them down. It smelled like old wood and damp concrete, but it was safer than upstairs. He shut the door quietly and turned off the light, leaving them in darkness. They waited, breathing softly. Footsteps echoed above. Heavy, slow, and close. Someone knocked on Ethan's door. He froze, holding his breath. Then came another knock, louder this time, followed by a calm male voice. "Mr. Ethan Cole, we'd like to ask you a few questions." Ethan didn't move, didn't answer. He could hear them. Talking outside. "He's home," one of them said. "Thermal shows heat inside." Ethan's heart slammed in his chest. Lyra placed a glowing hand on his arm and whispered, "Quiet, please." He nodded, swallowing hard. Minutes passed like hours. The men searched the hallway, then moved on, their voices fading slowly. When silence finally returned, Ethan let out a long, shaky breath. He sat on the cold floor, his head in his hands. He had never been so scared in his life. But when he looked at Lyra and Ari, their small, glowing faces full of fear, he knew he couldn't stop now. He had to protect them, no matter what it cost. That night, after the hunters were gone, Ethan led the girls back upstairs. He locked every door, blocked the windows, and packed a small bag with food and supplies. He looked at Lyra and said quietly, "We can't stay here anymore." She nodded in silence, holding Ari close. Outside, the wind howled softly, carrying a strange metallic echo. The hunters were still out there, and they wouldn't stop until they found what they were looking for. But Ethan was no longer just a kind stranger. He was their protector now, and he was ready to fight for them, even against the entire world. Night returned, heavy and silent, wrapping the small town in darkness like a warning. Ethan sat on the floor of his apartment, his back against the wall, staring at the dim glow coming from Lyra and Ari. The two alien girls slept close together, their silver skin faintly shimmering, their soft breathing the only sound in the room. Ethan's mind was restless, filled with questions that had no answers. Who were they running from? What did the hunters want? And how could he possibly protect them? He looked at the old clock on the wall. Past midnight. His body was tired, but his thoughts refused to stop. He had never been brave, never a hero, but something deep inside told him that this was different. These girls didn't belong here, yet they were in his care now. They were scared, alone, and depending on him to keep them alive. He rubbed his face and whispered to himself, "What am I doing?" But even as he said it, he knew the truth. He couldn't abandon them. Not after everything he had seen. Suddenly, a soft sound broke the silence. Ari whimpered in her sleep, her small hands glowing brighter for a moment. Lyra woke instantly, her eyes snapping open, alert. She placed a gentle hand over her sister's chest, whispering something in their strange language. The glow slowly faded, and Ari's breathing steadied. Ethan watched quietly, realizing again that they weren't just different. They were fragile, almost dying. He moved closer, keeping his voice low. "Is she okay?" Lyra nodded slowly. "Weak. No food. No sun." Ethan frowned. "Sun? You mean she needs sunlight?" Lyra hesitated, then nodded again. Light, help. Energy. Ethan understood, at least a little. Whatever they were, their bodies needed something more than human food. He stood up and walked to the window, opening the curtain slightly. The street below was quiet, only a few dim lights in the distance. He looked toward the sky. Dark clouds covered the stars. Lyra joined him, standing silently beside him. Her glowing eyes reflected the faint light from the street, filled with sadness. She whispered softly, "Our world, bright, full of light." Ethan turned to her. "You miss it, don't you?" She nodded slowly. "Home, gone." Her voice broke, just a little, and for a moment, she looked like any frightened girl far from home. Ethan wanted to comfort her, but he didn't know how. He said gently, "You'll see it again someday." She looked at him with quiet hope. "You think?" He hesitated, then smiled. "Yeah, I think so." She seemed to believe him, even if he wasn't sure himself. A few hours later, as dawn approached, Ethan heard distant engines outside again. He peered through the curtain and saw the same black vans returning, this time moving slower, scanning every house. He cursed it under his breath. "They're still looking," he said. Lyra's face hardened. "They never stop." Ethan turned away from the window and started packing quickly. He threw canned food, water, and a few clothes into a backpack. Lyra watched him silently, understanding without words. "You have to move," he said. "They'll find us if we stay here." But then came the problem. Where could they go? The whole town was under watch, and the forest near Ridgewood was likely full of soldiers. He thought about calling someone, maybe the police, but stopped immediately. If the government was already involved, trusting anyone could be dangerous. If he made the wrong choice, Lyra and Ari would be captured again. Or worse. He paced the room thinking. Lyra's voice broke through his thoughts. "You help. They hurt you." Ethan looked at her confused. She continued slowly. "If you help us, they take you too." He sighed. "I know, but I can't just leave you." Her eyes softened. "Why?" He smiled sadly. "Because it's what humans do when someone needs help." There was silence for a moment. Then Lyra said something he didn't expect. "You good, human heart strong." Her words touched him more deeply than he wanted to admit. He didn't feel strong, but somehow she believed in him. And maybe that belief was enough to keep him going. As the morning light began to rise, they left the apartment quietly. Ethan carried Ari in his arms, her small body light and warm like a dying ember. Lyra walked beside him, covering her face with his old jacket. They moved through back alleys, avoiding cameras and main roads. Every shadow felt like a threat. Every sound made Ethan's heart jump, but they kept going step by step. When they reached the edge of town, Ethan stopped near an abandoned warehouse. "This will do for now," he said, unlocking the rusty door. Inside, the air was cold and dusty, but it was shelter. He set Ari down gently on an old blanket and sat beside her. Lyra looked around nervously, then back at him. "You stay." Ethan nodded. "For now," she hesitated, then whispered, "Thank you, Ethan." He smiled tiredly. "Don't thank me yet, we're not safe." Outside, the sound of engines echoed faintly again. The hunters were getting closer. Ethan looked at Lyra and said quietly, We have one choice now. We fight or we run. Lyra met his gaze, her blue eyes shining with determination. Then we run, she said. And for the first time, Ethan saw it. Not just fear, but courage. They were no longer helpless. They were ready to survive, together. The night wind howled through the cracks of the old warehouse, carrying the smell of rain and rust. Ethan sat against the wall, exhausted, his eyes fixed on the two alien girls sleeping nearby. Lyra held Ari close, both wrapped in an old blanket he had found among the broken crates. Their soft glow painted the room in faint silver light. For a moment, Ethan forgot about the danger, about the hunters, about the world outside. But peace never lasted long for them anymore. Ari's breathing grew shallow, her glow fading. Ethan noticed it first. The change in her skin, the color draining like dimming light. He rushed to Lyra, panic in his voice. She's getting worse. Lyra opened her eyes, fear flashing across her face. She pressed her hands against Ari's chest, whispering strange words in her language. Blue sparks flickered between her fingers, but they faded quickly. Her energy was too weak. She need core light, Lyra said, her voice trembling. Ethan frowned. Core light, what is that? Lyra pointed upward toward the sky. From our ship. Our power. It heal. Ethan's mind raced. Their ship, the crash site near Ridgewood Forest, that was where the soldiers had taken the wreckage. If their core light was part of it, maybe it was still there, locked inside some government facility. Ethan stood up, heart pounding. Then we're going to get it, he said firmly. Lyra looked at him in disbelief. No, too dangerous. Humans guard. Ethan shook his head. I don't care. If that's the only way to save her, I'm going. For a long moment, Lyra just stared at him, then nodded slowly. Then I come, she whispered. They waited until midnight, when the town fell silent again. Ethan packed a flashlight, his old security card, and a map. He remembered working as a contractor years ago near the old military site. Maybe that experience would help him now. He loaded Ari gently into the back seat of his car, covering her with blankets. Her breathing was faint but steady, her glow nearly gone. Lyra sat beside her, holding her hand tightly. Ethan started the engine, whispering, "Hang on, we're going to bring her home." The road to Ridgewood was dark and full of fog. Ethan drove with his headlights off, guided only by moonlight. Every few minutes, Lyra looked out the window nervously, watching the skies. Once she whispered, "They still search." As a faint blue light moved across the clouds, Ethan gripped the wheel tighter, praying they wouldn't be seen. When they reached the forest, Ethan parked far from the main gate. The facility loomed ahead, tall fences, barbed wire, and silent drones hovering near the perimeter. It looked impossible to enter, but Ethan had no other choice. He turned to Lyra. "Stay with Ari, I'll go in." Lyra grabbed his arm, shaking her head. "You know survive alone." Ethan gave a faint smile. "You don't know me that well." Before she could argue, he slipped out of the car and disappeared into the trees. The forest floor was wet and cold, leaves crunching softly under his boots. He moved carefully, remembering the layout from his old job. There was a maintenance tunnel near the north fence, hidden under the roots of a fallen tree. He found it half covered in mud, pried it open, and crawled inside. The tunnel was narrow and dark, but it led him closer to the facility. After a few minutes, he reached a metal grate and peered through. Inside, the halls glowed with sterile white light filled with strange humming machines. Ethan took a deep breath, broke the grate loose, and stepped through. He crept down the hallway, avoiding cameras, his footsteps silent on the cold floor. Then he saw it, through a glass window, a large glowing cylinder filled with bright blue liquid. Inside floated a crystal-like sphere, pulsing gently like a heartbeat. It radiated the same energy as Lyra and Ari's glow. "This must be it," he whispered. He looked around for a control panel, found one, and started working fast. But before he could finish, an alarm blared, red lights flashing everywhere. "Security breach detected," a voice echoed through the hall. Ethan cursed under his breath, pulling the lever anyway. The chamber hissed open, releasing a wave of cold air. He grabbed the glowing sphere, feeling its energy burn through his hands. Guards shouted from down the hall. Ethan ran, clutching the core tightly. Bullets echoed behind him, glass shattered, alarm screamed. He burst through a side door, sprinting into the forest, his lungs on fire. He could hear the hum of drones overhead, searching, scanning. But then, a bright flash of light filled the trees. Lyra stood there, her hands glowing bright blue. She had come after him. Energy burst from her palms, forming a shield that deflected the drone's beams. Ethan stumbled toward her, breathless, holding the core. "Go!" he shouted. She grabbed his hand, and together they ran through the forest toward the car. When they reached Ari, her light was almost gone. Lyra placed the glowing sphere on her chest and whispered words Ethan couldn't understand. The sphere began to melt into light, spreading through Ari's body. The air filled with a soft hum, warm and alive. Ari's eyes opened, shining brighter than ever before. Lyra smiled weakly, tears in her eyes. Ethan fell back, exhausted but relieved. They had done it. They had saved her. But before he could even breathe, a voice came from behind them. "Don't move!" Ethan turned slowly and saw soldiers emerging from the shadows, guns raised. They had found them again. The rescue was over, but the real fight was just beginning. The forest was silent except for the hum of the glowing core fading in Ari's chest. Her silver skin shimmered again, her breathing steady and strong. Ethan barely had time to smile before a sharp voice cut through the darkness. "Don't move," the soldier repeated, stepping out of the trees with his gun raised. Behind him, more men appeared, all dressed in black suits with glowing scanners on their arms. Red lights from their helmets swept across the scene, stopping on the three figures beside the car. Ethan froze, his heart pounding. He could feel Lyra trembling beside him, her eyes glowing brighter as fear mixed with anger. Ari held her sister's arm tightly, still weak but awake. The lead soldier raised his weapon higher. "Step away from them now." Ethan swallowed hard and stood in front of the girls. "They're just kids," he shouted. "They're not a threat." The soldier's voice came cold and sharp. "They're not children, they're property." Ethan felt rage burn through his chest. He had seen cruelty before, but never like this. He took a small step back, shielding Lyra and Ari with his body. Lyra's hand glowed softly behind him, her voice trembling. "Ethan, no fight." He turned slightly, whispering, "I won't let them take you." But the soldiers were already moving. Two of them circled around, pointing guns at the car. Ethan knew he couldn't win a fight like this. Not with weapons, but maybe with something else. The wind began to shift, carrying static in the air. Lyra's eyes burned brighter, her energy building as fear turned into something stronger. She raised her hand slowly, light flowing from her palm like liquid fire. The soldiers hesitated, their scanners flashing warning symbols. "Stand down!" their leader yelled. But Lyra didn't move. She was protecting her sister, protecting Ethan. A pulse of "bye." Blue light shot outward, blinding them all for a second. The ground trembled as the air filled with raw energy. The drones above exploded into sparks, and the soldiers stumbled backward. Ethan grabbed Ari and pulled her behind the car, shouting, "Lyra, stop, you'll hurt yourself." But Lyra only looked at him, her expression calm and determined. Her voice echoed softly, "I know hurt. I protect." Her light grew so bright it lit up the entire forest. The soldiers opened fire, bullets cutting through the air, but every round stopped inches from her, dissolving into dust. Ethan stared in awe, realizing what she was doing. She was turning her energy into a shield. It surrounded them in a bubble of blue light, humming like the heartbeat of a star. Then, something unexpected happened. The leader of the soldiers stepped forward, holding a strange device. He pressed a button, and a deep hum filled the air, a sound that made Lyra scream. Her light flickered violently. Ethan shouted, "Stop it! You're killing her!" The man smirked. "She's not alive like you think. She's a specimen." Those words shattered something inside Ethan. He charged forward before he could even think, tackling the man to the ground. The device fell, rolling away into the dirt. The soldier punched him hard, but Ethan didn't stop. He fought with everything he had, not out of anger but out of love for Lyra, for Ari, for what was right. Lyra, gasping and shaking, crawled toward the fallen device. She pressed her glowing hand over it, and the machine melted into blue dust. Her light flickered weakly, her body trembling. Ari crawled to her side, crying softly, "Sister, stop!" But Lyra just smiled, touching Ari's face gently. "No cry. Light always find way." Her glow intensified once more, spreading through the trees like sunrise. The forest turned bright as day, birds scattered, and the soldiers screamed, covering their eyes. Then, silence. When the light faded, the soldiers were gone, vanished without a trace. The trees stood still, glowing faintly where the energy had passed. Ethan blinked, his vision slowly clearing. He looked around. Lyra was lying on the ground, still. Ari knelt beside her, sobbing quietly. Ethan ran to her, lifting Lyra's head gently into his lap. Her skin was dim now, the glow fading slowly. "Lyra," he whispered, "you're going to be okay." She smiled weakly. "You, safe now." Ethan shook his head, tears filling his eyes. "Don't say that. We need you." She looked up at him with a faint smile. "You, good human," she whispered. Her hand touched his cheek, warm and soft. Then the light faded completely. Ari cried silently, the small pendant around Lyra's neck beginning to glow. The same light that once filled her body rose into the air, floating like a tiny star. It hovered for a moment, then drifted upward into the sky, vanishing among the clouds. Ari watched, whispering softly, "She home now." Ethan held her close, his chest heavy with pain, but also something new. Peace. Lyra had saved them, and maybe the world would never know. Days later, Ethan returned to his quiet town. The world went on as if nothing had happened. The government denied everything. The news said it was all meteor activity. But Ethan knew the truth. Every night he went to the alley where he used to feed. He had the stray dogs. He placed food on the ground, then looked up at the stars. Sometimes, on clear nights, a faint blue light blinked among them, and Ethan smiled softly, whispering, "Good night, Lyra." Because somewhere, far beyond those stars, he knew she was watching.